Hi there and welcome to Craft Jitsu's Embroidery Basics video. This one's about thread. Now I've done some little stitch samples for you here so you can see some of the basic threads in action. This first one is stranded cotton and it comes in a skein like this. Now you'll see here that it comes in 6 strands, and for the first circle I used all 6 strands just here. It's quite thick like this and it can be quite difficult to shade, but it's very good for the basics. So normally when we're sewing we split it down to 2 strands, and that's what the second sample shows. Now it looks a little more delicate like this. Sometimes it can look a little bit childish if you use the full 6 strands. It just depends what you're doing with it. Now because the thread is thinner it becomes a lot easier to do shading, and when you're doing this don't forget that both strands don't have to be the same colour. Now this third sample is stranded cotton again, but it's a variegated one. This means that the colour changes along the length. So the colour changes by itself as you stitch. It can add a nice level of interest, and don't forget you can always use a plain stranded cotton and one of these in the needle at the same time. Now this is a perlé. You can't split this, so it stays quite thick, but it does give a nice textured effect. Now this is what it looks like when you've taken it outside of the pretty skein that you'll see just coming here. But just wind it up onto one of those little thread winders that you saw at the beginning and it'll all be fine again. Now you might be able to see just here that the thread alters as we go along because I used too long a piece of thread. So I guess the tip is to just keep the lengths nice and short. Now this one's a variegated perlé, so again the colour changes as you go. Now this is some acrylic wool. It gets quite fluffy quite easily, but you do get an awful lot of it for not very much money. And it adds all kinds of nice textures to your work. And don't forget to look out for it in the charity shops, because you'll generally find some there. Now this is a metallic machine embroidery thread. It's very fine. It's actually quite difficult to stitch one-stranded in satin stitch as you see here. But it does create a nice effect. So to make things easier in some ways, this one is done with 3 strands. Now it means the threads lie much nicer and it doesn't take anywhere near as long a time. However, it does mean that occasionally one or other thread will go disappearing off and create loops around the back, so you have to be careful and make sure that everything's where it's supposed to be. Now this sample shows 1 strand of stranded cotton and 1 strand of metallic thread. Makes the metallic thread much easier to work with. And you can see the pretty shine on the metallic threads. Now these ones at the bottom are machine embroidery threads. Again, they're very fine, but they are pretty. Now this sample is the same thread with 3 strands used at the same time. Thanks to my mum for this tip. Again, it can be a little bit tricky to keep an eye on all 3 threads, but it's well worth it. This last sample is a variegated machine embroidery thread. Again, I used 3 strands here. And this is a different type of machine embroidery thread, just not quite as shiny, but still the same thing. Now this is sewing cotton. I suppose there's no real reason why you can't use this as a beginner, but we don't tend to do it for some reason. Don't ask me why. Now this last is an invisible thread. It's very fine and quite difficult to see. It's very good for couching down or for beads. Now I hope that's answered some of your questions about threads. If you've enjoyed the video, please feel free to share it or to subscribe to our channel.